Welcome to the Steady On Stronger Together podcast. I am your host, Angie Bauman. I so enjoyed spending time with today's guest, speaker, writer, and poet, Bethany Howard. Bethany's book, Permission Granted, encourages us to be who we are, right where we are. During our conversation, Bethany and I talked about ways to embrace who we are, to cultivate courage, and to impact our world. She reminds us that bravery begets bravery and inspires us to take those first steps into less apologizing and more living. Let's listen in. Hello, Steady On community, and welcome to this Stronger Together conversation. I'm Angie Bauman, and my guest today is Bethany Howard. Bethany, thank you so much for joining us for a little while today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Angie.
Bethany is a speaker, a writer, a poet, and a lover of too much Netflix, I think. Is this true?
I'm afraid it is.
So what is your poison, if I will, on Netflix? What's your go-to? There's a lot there. So
there are so much. I love like the cooking shows, anything with a good story, like the Street Eats one. I loved that one because it was so much about the story of these stalls on the streets where they have amazing food, and it's a generational thing, passed on recipes from generation to generation to generation. And I actually pulled a quote once from one of the stories and was just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. I can't quote it right now, but anything with a great story, I can't get enough of it.
So more series and shows or movies or all of the above, just the story?
Yeah, I do tend to like a series, something with episodes, so that, I just, half the time I'm catching a half hour here or there. So it's really easy, to do it that way. So
Yes. My husband got me a t-shirt for Christmas that says just one more episode. I'm like, no, stop it.
I love it.
Bethany's project that we're going to talk about today is Permission Granted, Embrace Who You Are, Cultivate Courage, Impact Your World. And it has inside it over 30 poems and 70 journal prompts. It's a beautiful book. It's just a beautiful presentation. And the goal is to really help the reader engage with their passion and their purpose and their possibilities. And I love that. I love that that's your goal with the book. Can you tell me just a little bit like why this format, journaling and poems, and what has that kind of presentation, I guess, meant to you as you put it together?
Yeah, I started kind of working in this format of these short form pieces. I used to, do more like an essay kind of a situation. And I would say probably a couple years ago, I kind of just started pursuing this different format and kind of trying it on and, see what I think about it. And I just got a lot of feedback on it, and it helped me. I'm not a big structure process person. I'll go ahead and own that. So for me, doing this format, like there's something in me, I see something catches my attention, and I just have to get it out and on the page. And so sometimes it comes out in this format where it's just easily accessible. Like that's one of the ways my one friend described it. She's like, you just put it right there for me. I didn't have to dig for multiple paragraphs to get the idea that you were trying to communicate. And it seems to also work for me in that I can just get it out. And usually if it comes out and I'm having to play around with it a lot or massage it and play with wording, it usually just ends up not being any good. So the ones that I like, I'm sitting there and it just comes out, or the ones that I sit there and cry through. I know that usually those are the ones that are meant for maybe somebody else to see. Maybe those are words that someone else needs to hear. And so that's, this format seems to work for me. And actually it was Sherry Gregory who said, when I kind of put forth this idea of what if I don't know, what if I put a book together? And she said, okay, I want it to be a physical book, and I want to be able to engage with the pieces that you write. And so that was kind of, I guess, the beginning of having the journal and the prompts and the pieces all together. And so that people had the opportunity, my hope for this book is that it's got notes in the margins and stickers and little keepsakes and, little Post-it notepads from a quote that you heard on a Netflix episode. But just that it's lived in, and that, it helps a woman to get to where she's meant to be.
Yeah. I think a lot of us want to journal, or that we want that to be meaningful to us, but that's not something, even though I write a lot, I have I have a notebook, a spiral notebook that I make some notes, when I do some study or something. But I think to have some help with that, I think is awesome. I think that's a wonderful format. And I think it kind of, the fact that it's something different, I think speaks to kind of what you're trying to do through it. Because I think it takes courage to try something new, or to, do something, put something out in the world that maybe is just a little bit different. And I love that. And so I want to go to this subtitle of your book, because I think these are very strong words. Embrace who you are, cultivate courage, impact your world, which I see you trying to do in this project, actually. So I see that story coming through you, and then also giving it to us as a gift as we invite it to come through us as well. But I'm guessing that those have been things that maybe you've struggled with in your life, or they wouldn't mean so much to you. So I wondered if you would speak about that just a little bit. Where have you found doing those things, embracing who you are, cultivating courage, impacting your world? Where have you found that to be a struggle for you? And maybe even what are some things that's helped you take steps towards that, if you will?
I feel like I was writing to who I was like 5 or 10 years ago. A lot of times, not always. And sometimes it's me now, and sometimes it's the story that I imagine for the person that I pass in the grocery store. But a lot of times it is to me and to the woman who is reading, who is where I was 5 to 10 years ago. And so I think that, because my hope with the pieces is, and with the book, is that it moves somebody through that process of embracing who they are, cultivating courage, and then taking that next brave step and impacting their world. And so I do think that for me, it kind of started that I had to understand who I am and understand my giftings and my talents in order to embrace who I was. And I think that's hard to do. I think it's a challenge to be vulnerable with yourself enough to, kind of hold the things, who you are, and look at them for what they are. And I think that if I didn't take time to do that and kind of understand that, then I really couldn't embrace who I was. And I couldn't look at myself and say, yes, you're an imperfect masterpiece, made in the image of God. And I have a passion, a purpose, and possibilities, and they were created on purpose by God. And so they should be used. And I think that there was an unraveling that had to happen in order for me to kind of get to that place. And that was when I was a mom with 3 young kids. I had an 18-month-old when my twins were born. So I had 3 under 2 for a bit there. And so, yeah, my life was consumed by, and still is in some ways, with kids and baby stuff in that stage of things. And so there was this point where I just found myself, I was trying to coupon. I was doing things for my family, but it was fun for me. And I had the coupons all laid out on the couch, and all of a sudden nap time was over. So I was like scrambling, so, run upstairs, get the kids, get them down the stairs safely. And of course I had to run to the bathroom in the most inopportune time. That's how it goes. And I came back out, and the coupons were everywhere. They were all over the floor. They were under the couch. They were across the room. And I was just so frustrated in that moment. So I was like, okay, guys, well, we gotta clean this up. We gotta pick up all these coupons. And Mom will get them all situated later. And so I laid on the floor and I was like reaching underneath the couch for the coupons, and my kids sat on me because they thought, this looks like fun. Yeah, we're playing. This looks like fun. But for me, it was a picture all of a sudden of what I felt inside. I don't know why I'm getting emotional today about it.
That's good. Yeah.
So yeah, it was all of a sudden I was like, oh gosh, okay, what is this? Why am I having this like visceral response in this moment? And I remember I called my husband at some point and he's like, do you need me to come home? And yes. I was like, no,
I've been there. Yeah.
I'm going to be okay. But there's something here. And so that was kind of the beginning of this writing journey. And that kind of set me off on pursuing some of the things that fulfilled me, because what I realized was that I had to step out and embrace all of the parts of me so that my kids could have a whole mom and so that I could be a whole person. And so it kind of started there from this place of discontent and overwhelm when I realized that, there's parts of me that aren't fulfilled by mothering, and I need to embrace that. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It doesn't mean there's something that's broken in me. It just means that there's pieces of me that aren't fulfilled by being with my kids all day long. I didn't work outside of the house at that time. And so it was an embracing of who I was, because I don't know if I'd ever really done that, Angie. Like I just, I got married young. I had kids, we were married 6 years before we had kids. So we did have some time, but I like to call myself a late bloomer. So here we are. I just celebrated my 43rd birthday, and I do feel like I am still encountering new parts of myself. And I think that's a good thing. But that's kind of embracing who I am. And that was definitely a part of my story. And I think we all have those moments. And I still have those moments where I need to, step back and look at where I am and own all of the parts of me and take that permission granted to embrace the parts of me that God has put within me. And then also the permission granted to say, I don't love this right here, Bethany. Like, I think we need to work on this. So that's embracing who I am. And then the cultivate courage, that's hard. And I think part of it is because I am still, going through that process of embracing who I am. And so I tended to let fear drive.
Sure.
And I tended to make excuses. I would take myself out of the running. I would look at my deficits, at my experiences, what I know, my giftings, and I would decide that I didn't measure up to whatever the task was at hand. And so I stayed small. I chose small. And what I know now is that when we choose courage and we just take a small step, courage comes with us. Courage meets us there in those moments. So instead of letting fear drive, sometimes fear just has to come with me. And I know now that courage meets me there. And I mean, just an example of the book itself, like sometimes I am surprised that I'm on the other side of this and that it actually happened.
Yes.
Because there were just so many times. Well, I think it's a sign of growth, I guess, that I didn't let the things that I didn't know keep me from beginning this journey. I've realized through this journey that there are going to be things that I come up against and I'm not going to know how to do them. And that's okay. Like I can just figure out how to do them. It's okay. It's not something that discredits me or discounts me from the journey. It's just something that is a growth opportunity. And so that's been a huge gift through this process. But sometimes it's just it's just a simple step that helps us cultivate courage instead of looking at all of the things that could hold us back and making our own judgments. I've decided that fear doesn't get to call all the shots anymore. And that's a really freeing thing.
Yeah. I think it's really important. A couple of things you said, I want to circle back to. One, what you just said about something discredit or discounting us. I think I don't know for sure that I look for those things, but I'm uber sensitive to them. I think sometimes I actually do look for them. What are the reasons why I'm not qualified? What are the reasons why I shouldn't? What are the reasons why this is risky, unsafe, unsmart, all of those things? Because then it does then, as you said, let the fear drive. And sometimes I think, it's like what you're talking about. We're going to talk about taking up space, but what you just said about staying small. When I stay small, it's less likely I will fail or be embarrassed or disappoint myself or someone else. And so, I think that sometimes we do deliberately look for things self-conscious or subconsciously, deliberately, maybe, if that's fair to say, look for these things that discount us or discredit us. I want to go back what you were talking about with the kids and the coupons, though, because I think that's a really important. Will you talk about that just a second more? Because what were you feeling? Like, did the kids represent something to you? Like, to me, I'm going to tell you what I see in that. And you tell me if that, because I imagine you're stretched out, doing the best you can, trying to reach things that are out of reach. And this is the thing that's keeping you down, like the weight of these children, sort of. I don't know, but I want you to correct me if that's not right. And then feeling like something has to give here, right? Because I can't reach the things that I'm reaching for in order to accomplish the things I'm trying to accomplish. And I love these kiddos to pieces. It goes without saying, right? I love them. But right now, I just feel like I can't move because of them. I don't know. Is that fair? I want you to speak to that. Yeah.
Yes, most definitely. And the frustrating thing for me in that moment was like, the couponing thing was like, it was a fun thing for me, but it was still directly related to my family. Right. It was still groceries. It was still shopping. It was still making dinner, all of those things. And I mean, for some reason, I thought that was going to be something that was going to be, I don't know that I thought it was going to be fulfilling for me, but
it was a worthwhile endeavor, if nothing else, right?
It was a worthwhile endeavor. It was fun. It kind of was outside my normal, and it just gave me like an adventure, something to look forward to, and those kinds of things. And of course, I was helping the bottom line, which felt good to me.
Right.
And I just think it was, I don't know that I had stayed still enough to really articulate, what it was that was in me, that, why I was frustrated, why I was discontent at times. And then I think with the kids sitting on me, it just was like, oh my gosh, I get it now.
Yeah.
And it was just this overwhelming sense of like, there's other things in me, but I feel like I can't get to them. And I also don't know what they are. And so for somebody who's a 9 on the Enneagram, who decisions are hard and all of that, all of those things and processes and structure, it just was overwhelming to me to think like, okay, maybe there's something else that's for me to do, but I don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of conversations, but soon after that, I went to a couple of conferences. I started doing some more writing, and that kind of, there was some other, what's the word I want? Detours from writing, but I keep coming back to it.
Yeah. I just think that, I wanted to go back there because I think no matter what season someone might be in, I think we can pick up that illustration, right? That idea that something is on me that's keeping me back. And maybe those are the things that we're using to discount and discredit ourselves. And yet the reality is that God has created us, as you said so well earlier, God has created us with gifts and talents that we struggle sometimes to admit, recognize, and certainly live in, right? But if we can identify that thing that's on our back, if you will, holding us down, then we can do these things that you're talking about, impacting our world and stepping out and knowing that courage will meet us where we when we step out, courage will meet us
Yeah.
there. Yeah. Yeah. I just think that's a beautiful illustration. Thank you for sharing it from your
Oh, yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course.
So,
Of course.
you hope to help us give ourselves permission to take up space. That's I use that language quite a bit too, actually, because it's something I struggle with, and to make no apologies for who we are. So why do you feel like, talk to us a little bit more about why do you feel like it's so important for us to be able to take up space? What does that mean to you?
It just means to me that I'm honoring God with the gifts that He's given me, and there has to be a reason for them. They're not just there. They weren't an afterthought. They were on purpose, and so it is up to me to kind of pursue what that looks like and how I use them, what the possibilities might be, and I don't have to apologize for pursuing those things because they were gifts that were given to me. And so it's very much within my rights, within my calling to go ahead and pursue the things that God has given to me. And I feel like sometimes we forget that, like you're saying, we make excuses for it, or we think impact is for somebody else, and it's not something that we have to worry about. But I think it's very much, why would God give us gifts and then ask us to not use them, or to hide them, or to pretend that they don't exist, and that, this is all that I meant for, this is all that I've always done. This is my comfort level. This is where I've always lived. And instead, there's God is just bigger than we can imagine, and He's bigger in my life than I can imagine. And, though I try to stay small, and in doing so, I'm also keeping God small, and trying to control what He can do in my life and where He takes me. And, that's the impact thing. We can only do what we can do, and the impact isn't up to us. That our impact could be a small ripple, and it could be also a large, huge thing. But the reality is that impact is impact. And I think that once I kind of let go of this hierarchical idea of impact, I was able to embrace what was before me to do.
I can relate to that so much. I'm an abuse survivor, and it was years before, I mean, like probably 25 years before I began to share pieces of my story. And when I first began to do that, I was very resistant in some ways, because I didn't want to draw that attention to myself, and somebody else has a harder story than mine, and all those things, right, that we use.
Right.
And as I matured in my spiritual relationship, one of the things that I really felt the Lord saying to my heart was, like, this is becoming sort of an obedience issue between, He and I, like it was a stumbling block almost in my spiritual relationship, because He's like, I've given you a voice. We've done so much healing together. There are things that I have taught you about yourself as you've listened to me, and as you've learned from me, and as you've studied me, that can benefit other people. Like your story through Him. I mean, it's His story in me, right? Living itself out of me. But your redemptive story is powerful. And as long as you keep pulling back from that, the glory, I mean, He'll do His work through other people. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't need me, but He has gifted me, right, with this opportunity. And I really had to wrestle with that, because it was something that, like, I didn't want to not do it, and I didn't want to do it either, and I think that's where we find ourselves sometimes, at that crossroads, and we have to be okay enough in ourselves to know He actually wants to use us to make an impact. He actually wants to do that. He wants our lives to be a Bible character story. Like, we're the people in the Bible, as illustrations of His redemption. We just lived at a different time. We're those people too. And I know I struggle less now than I used to, but still struggle with this idea that my life can have that kind of impact. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I was thinking actually just this morning about, just the small moments that make an impact. And one of them for me was when my kids were little, my twins were infants, and we were at church, and one of the ladies on staff, she often taught, she often preached. And I was sitting, in the Sunday service, and it was time for my kids to eat. So I just sat there and nursed my babies. And she walked past me and just kind of, hugged my shoulder and was just like, yes, this is where you should be. You sit right there and you feed your babies. Yeah. And it was such a small thing. But I think it was the beginning of this journey, this beginning of permission granted. She could have walked by and said nothing. Mm-hmm. And there are women with other stories who have been shamed for feeding their children. Mm-hmm. And they have a different story. And there are still ripples from that too, that they are dealing with. And so it just strikes me that our stories, they do have impact, not only in our own lives, mm-hmm. but also in the people that hear our stories and who can be brave because of our stories, or who can then proceed to do what they're created to do because they've seen our bravery in action, because they've seen God working in our lives, and that our confidence, my confidence isn't in what I can do or in what I can write. And that, that's a struggle too. Like you're saying, that fight against, well, other people have other stories, and, what is mine to other people. Other people will, get what they need probably if I am silent. And maybe they won't. Mm-hmm. I mean, if, just the way that you communicate, the way that you show up and take up your space, and the way that other people do, other people are getting stories and hearing your message and hearing God's message through you because you are taking up your space.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can serve, each of us can serve as a reminder of God's faithfulness when someone else needs it, right? Like your story of nursing your child that day, it's God's faithfulness through that woman, right? Mm-hmm. And we can, and sometimes we can remember those on our own. And sometimes people are struggling and they need to remember them because they see it in someone else. And we all have the deep, impactful ability to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as we talk about taking up space, it's important, I think, for us to ask ourselves if we're taking up our space. Yes. But also you talk about how important it is to encourage others to take up their space as well. So talk about how we do that simultaneously, take up our space, but not at the detriment of someone else, because there's enough space. We forget that sometimes. Like it's not, if I take up my space, you have less space. Actually, the opposite is true, is it not? The more I can be confident in myself and take up my space, the more I want you to take up your space. So talk to us a little bit about that idea, if you will.
Yes, I'm a firm believer, because I've seen it in my own life, that bravery begets bravery.
Ooh, and I love that.
I don't know where I would be if I hadn't started this process of surrounding myself with other people, other women who were bravely doing what they're called to do. Yeah. And I think that we have to do that for other people. And I'm not ashamed of the fact that sometimes I need people alongside me. I need somebody to help me do what I'm meant to do sometimes. And sometimes it's you emailing and saying, hey, Bethany, do you want to chat? Yes, actually I do. And sometimes it's, God orchestrating our next steps for us, even when, we're digging in our heels. And I often when I reflect on things, God has to sometimes kick me in the butt to get me moving. And sometimes he uses other people. He uses other people's bravery, other people's stories. He uses their, like you said, the symptoms, the way that God is faithful in their lives. Like I see God's faithfulness, and I know that can be true and will be true in my own life too. And there are women who struggle to take up their space, whether that's because of, issues of financial issues, whether that's because of institutional issues with systemic racism, for example. So I definitely feel that it is our calling to not only take up our space, but then to also help others do that, to leverage where we are to help the next person take up their space, because that is also our calling. We also reflect God when we do that. And when we hoard space, when we try to, maintain boundaries, that just makes us small, and that steals from other people. And so I definitely feel this calling to not only embrace and take up my space, but to also do all that I can to help others do that. And that's kind of what, in some small way, that's what this book is, to help others navigate that journey for themselves. And I have had the opportunity to come alongside other people, and they've asked me questions about the publishing journey and those kinds of things. And I also saw somebody on Instagram the other day who has a published book, actually has 2 published books, and she did a different route than I did. But she said, look, I know that I had connections. I know that I maybe have more money to work with than other people do. And so she said, I am taking, I think she said like 5 or 6 women, and they all had to be Black, Indigenous, people of color. And I'm giving you 3 hours of my time. And it was just like so encouraging to me. Like, yes, that's what this is supposed to look like. Yeah. That's how this is supposed to work. When people take up their space and then say, gosh, I want this for you too, because I know what this feels like. And I know that I'm honoring God. And I want you to be able to do that in the way that you are meant to as well.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean I have less if I share. It actually means we all have more, right? Somehow that makes me emotional. It's like when I share my space, I actually get more space, and you get more space too. It's crazy, but I promise that's how it works. Like,
it is. Mm-hmm. And I've seen
so
it.
Exciting.
I've seen it again and again. And permission granted is for all. So if it's just for me, it's no good. It doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. So permission granted is for all people. And if that's true, then I have to help others take up their space.
Amen. And I love that. Yes.
And it's just, I mean, it's all throughout the Bible. That was what Jesus was about. Like all of his conversations with women, the women at the well, the women with the issue of blood, like, yes, take up your space.
I see you. Yes.
Yes, I see you. I want to hear your voice in this. Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you. Yeah. And that, I mean, I can follow that.
Yeah.
Angie, I can get behind that. Yeah. And it's what this is all about. Like these conversations that we have, putting a book out, or even just, showing up in a real vulnerable space. I'm very much all about being real on social media when I show up there, which I try to do every day, but it's all about being real for me, because otherwise there's no point in me showing up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like, that's part of the calling that I have, just knowing that I don't want to steer somebody towards something that's fake. I want them to show up as real as themselves and acknowledge the bumps and the detours, because those are just parts of our story. And we don't have to pretend like they don't exist, and we don't have to apologize for them, because they're actually so many times God's goodness to us.
Yeah.
And the way that he teaches us, and the way that he draws us closer to himself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's good stuff. Hey, would you read us a poem from your book?
Oh, yes.
I would love to hear. You pick whatever what would you like to share with us this morning? I would love to hear just a little bit of your poetry.
Yeah, I would love to. So this is the cover.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
My first book has tennis shoes on it too. I should have brought one too. I have I have. They're like, I'll have to show it to you. It's the gray. You can almost see it. It's the gray. I can't get it. It's the gray one over there. It's it's called A Journey Worth Taking, and it's just a pair of shoes. When I saw your cover, I'm like, hey, we both like shoes on our cover.
I love that. That's so fun. That's so fun. This poem is called Stuck on a Tightrope. I'm stranded on a tightrope over a chasm of expectations. I am worn out from maintaining the status quo, frozen in place. Every muscle works at maximum capacity to keep me safe, steady, and stuck. I work so hard and do what should be done, but I don't make progress. All I can do is balance, but I'm no closer to the other side of the chasm. There's a lot of questions between here and there, a whole lot of strenuous, tedious, teetering steps to be taken. The choice is to stay or move forward. Am I more scared to stay in a precarious place and work so hard to not move at all? Or am I more frightened to never know what it is like to cross the chasm, to dance and take up my space where I belong? Proceed with fear. It is time. One step, then two. No more stuck on a tightrope.
I love that so much. It asks this question that I think if we're brave enough, we all ask about ourselves. What are we most scared of? Not doing it or doing it? Like, yeah, because I think there's something that's true about the fact that we're also equally, if not more so, scared of what we can become if we really believe and agree with who God says we are.
100%.
That's scary too. And so, yes. Yeah, just to everyone listening, like, this isn't about me and Bethany. This is about you. Like, you have this ability. When peace comes, a mentor told me this one time, peace comes when we are in full agreement about who God says we are. Yes. And that's scary too. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, before I let you go, I always close on this question. Is there anything right now that you are reading or listening to or watching or anything goes that's just kind of keeping you connected with God right now?
Yeah. So, although I said I watch a lot of Netflix, and I do, I don't have any of that represented here.
We support that, by the way.
Thank you for that. Thanks for signing off on that. As I was thinking about this fantastic question, I realized I'm watching spring. I'm watching spring come to life. I'm watching life happen. My mom started that with us when we were very young. We would, as I mentioned, well, off camera, I mentioned to you that I'm from Ohio originally. And I can remember taking walks, and she would say, okay, girls, let's look for signs of spring. And to this day, I am still enamored with spring and with nature in general. But I'm studying the flowers and, watching them grow and watching this amazing change take place before my eyes. And it's just miraculous. And it definitely keeps me connected to the one that created it all.
I love that. I am learning for the first time in my life. I taught a deep dive into the first part of Genesis a couple of years ago. And as I studied creation, I realized that really all my life, I have really ignored or missed the gift of creation. I'm not naturally a nature-y person. Like, that's just not my personality, and God really called me into this understanding of order and intentionality and beauty and giftedness. And so I appreciate that at a different level than I ever have. And I'm still actually kind of new at it, just to be honest. I know all my life I have kind of admired people who say, I just feel close to God outside. And I'm like, I feel close to bugs. Like, this is true. Like, I feel hot or cold or so, like, it's just not my, but I can so appreciate what you're saying right now. Cause I just am deliberately like, look at me all around you is what I feel like his call to me is. Yeah.
Yes. So good. That's so good. Yeah. So I'm reading Jesus and John Wayne by Kristin DuMez, and it's helping me realize that God is bigger than I think, that he can't be put in a box, even though we try.
Yes.
And it's been a hard read, but it's a good read, a necessary read.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to Jon Batiste. He has a new album out that's called We Are. And I'm a big fan of dancing to it in the kitchen. Highly recommend, 5 stars. Great album. But, I can't give any dancing tips. So, like, that is definitely somebody else's space, not mine.
Well, here's something about me you will appreciate, because a lot of times I used to really struggle after I gave like a message or taught something. I would struggle on the back end of it with some really negative feelings and emotions. And some time ago, several years ago now, when I was having more opportunities to do that and it was happening more often, I'm like, you need a different battle plan because this is ridiculous. You can't always take a day to recover after you do something, And I have this worship playlist and people who are close to me know that I will dance it out before I speak, because it's like, it infuses me with this divine confidence. I don't know. And it just reminds me of what we've just been talking about. Like, it's okay to take up this space. It's okay to have a message. It's okay to proclaim something that is true about the Lord. And so anyway, so I might have to check into that.
Yes.
See if I have some inspiration there, because I'm always looking for new material as I dance it out. So
enjoy.
This has been such a delight. I really appreciate you and your encouragement today. Thank you so much for Bethany for spending this time with us. And again, Bethany can be found and followed at bethanyhoward.com. Anywhere else on social media where do you hang out the most there?
I'm on Instagram, Bethany Permission Granted. That's how you can find me. Okay. And on Facebook, Bethany Howard Writer.
Okay.
So if you search that, you'll find me.
All right.
But yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and my website. And I post pieces often on my social media. So yeah, that's how you can find me.
Awesome. And so follow her, check her out, be encouraged. The book is Permission Granted. Embrace who you are, cultivate courage, impact your world. Bethany, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much. It was a joy to be here, Angie.
Until next time. Peace.
Next time.
Taking up space is quite honestly something I have always struggled to do. It remains one of the most difficult things that I try to do, because I learned early in my life that it is safer to stay small. But God invites us to trust Him in both who He has created us to be and how He has gifted us to serve Him. And the more I experience the immense joy of partnering with Him to reflect His love and grace in the world, the more I hear Him extending His blessing on my willingness to take up a little space for Him. I hope you hear that permission from God today, too. Thank you so much for listening. I pray that wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.